We will begin our upcoming trip to the United States on the West Coast with a number of investment engagements, including meetings with existing investors, HBO and, of course, Seagate. We will also meet with a range of potential investors, as well as attending the close of the Cinemagic Festival. As part of this programme, we will officiate at the opening of Invest Northern Ireland's new office in San Francisco. This is further evidence of our sustained success in engaging positively with US business. Our visit to Washington, D.C. continues to be an important part of the calendar of overseas events that we undertake each year. I can think of no other devolved administration that enjoys the access that we get at the White House or at the Speaker of the House of Representatives. This will be the 7th year that Northern Ireland's First Minister and Deputy First Minister have represented the Executive in Washington. On Friday the 14th, we will host the Northern Ireland Bureau Breakfast for 250 contacts from the Greater Washington area. That audience will include members of Congress, members of the Obama administration and business executives. Later that morning, we will have a private meeting at the White House, and indeed, of course, that will be before travelling, as we have in previous years, to Capitol Hill for the Speaker's St Patrick's Day lunch. As with all our overseas visits, the Deputy First Minister and I will ensure that our time outside Northern Ireland is used to maximum benefit.
Agus Moichas as an Hidaira as an Fragrishan. I thank the First Minister for his response. Would I ask the First, or indeed the Office of First and Deputy First Minister, if there will be dialogue concerning the Haas process with either the political representatives in America or indeed the American administration, given the added impetus and focus that there has been on it in recent times, particularly for victims?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would be very surprised if, when we speak to political representatives in the United States, that they wouldn't have an interest in what the current circumstances are in Northern Ireland, and we'll be very ready to share with them our views of what progress has been made to date and the difficulties that we now face. We've always had a good relationship with those in both the Republican and Democratic parties in the United States, and we've always been very happy to meet and to talk with them. And I don't think either of us will be reluctant to give an update, because I think there is a genuine interest in the United States that Northern Ireland should continue to make progress.
Jimmy Spratt. Mr. Spratt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the First Minister for answers so far. Given that the new office is opening, Vest office is opening in San Francisco, is the West Coast now a key target area for increased investment for Northern Ireland?
Well, yes, obviously we feel that there is much more that can be done on the West Coast of the United States. I think the fact that we've always been pushing and had a presence on the West Coast, but now see that there would be real value in upping our game on the West Coast. We already have, of course, one of our major employers, Seagate. We've had a very considerable relationship built up with HBO and indeed with a number of the film companies on the West Coast of the United States. And one of the agreed pushes that we have in our programme for government is around the creative industries, and the heart of that is on the West Coast of the United States. I think vindicates the decision by Invest Northern Ireland and of the Executive of pushing to get more investment on the West Coast, literally hundreds, and we hope before long thousands of jobs in Northern Ireland will be created through that process.
Jim Allister. Mr. Allister.
Thank you. The First Minister's partner, the Deputy First Minister, set the 17th of March as the deadline for agreeing to his demands on Haas. And the Minister's colleague, Mrs Foster, has rightly said that Haas was built upon deceit. If it has been built upon deceit, what future has that process, and what now is the point of it?
Well, I think we've already superseded the Haas process. We're into a leaders' meetings and set of meetings in relation to Haas. I don't think there's anybody in this House would find themselves satisfied that the three issues that had been discussed during the Haas process, namely the past parades and flags, are issues where the status quo is satisfactory. I'm certainly not satisfied that the status quo is satisfactory in any of those three areas. And it has been, I agree with many members who, during the course of Friday's debate, indicated that no matter what happens, those issues have to be addressed. If we don't address them now, they will have to be addressed at some stage. So whether you do it under the aegis of the Haas talks, which in my view are completed, but the issues do not go away, they have been taken up by the leaders' process, and I believe that the outcome of that process must be one that is satisfactory to the overwhelming majority of people in Northern Ireland, and not just to one political party in this House.
Question number 2 has been withdrawn. Leslie Creed.
Question number 3, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I will answer questions 3 and 7 together. On the 10th of February, we announced that £33 million will be invested in 23 projects aimed at tackling poverty and deprivation through improved community-based services and facilities. These first 23 projects have been identified as priorities by steering groups in each local area covered by the 9 social investment zones. Draft letters of offer have issued to the successful projects, including the new Directions project in the Southern Zone. These offers will be finalised following completion of verification and governance checks, which are now taking place in agreement by lead partners of the conditions of offer. Lead partners will then take forward the procurement to deliver the outcomes described in the project proposals that have been approved. At this point, Mr. Speaker, it is not possible to estimate precisely how long this process will take, and therefore it is not possible to give a commencement date for any project. We are keen to ensure that projects are fully established and underway as soon as possible, and our officials will be providing support to the lead partners to ensure this is the case. To this end, a conference for all lead partners has been arranged for the 10th of March. We anticipate significant progress towards delivery after this event. 5 of the projects under consideration will be based in or serve the North Down constituency. Within the South Eastern Social Investment Zone, the Early Intervention Project, the Youth Intervention Project and the Community-led Employability Project will operate on a zone-wide basis, therefore taking in the North Down constituency area. 2 of the capital projects, the Community Sports Cluster and the Community Housing Cluster, will include capital works within the constituency. Funding of all projects is subject to all necessary approvals being made.
Leslie Creed.
Thank the First Minister for his response. Could the Minister clarify when all the projects will actually be approved? And also, is there a date by which the money must be spent?
Mr. Speaker, we may be taking those questions in reverse. No, we have ring-fenced the funding, so the overall £80 million will be available whenever the projects come forward to deal with it. The zones know the quantum within which they will work. In the case, I think, of North Down, there is an indicative fund of about £8 million available. The zone itself has put forward the projects that they want to move forward with in that area, which takes me to his first question. The Department obviously has to go through the economic appraisals. It's been the view of many people in this chamber that the consideration of these matters has to be robust. We have to make sure that we're getting value for money. We have to be sure that the business cases do stand up to scrutiny. I think it's proper that we make sure that we get these issues right. So the answer has to be as soon as is practicable and possible.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is the Minister aware of the local concerns regarding the consequential impact on both the Kildowney Community Hub and Lurgan YMCA? Should the Youth Justice Agency not lease accommodation from the Lurgan YMCA?
Well, I understand, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure everybody in the House will be aware of the precise details that he's referring to, but I understand that there is wide support for the scheme. and there is some concern locally about the arrangements, and there may be some delay locally because of some questions that are arising from it. We are very keen to make progress with the scheme, and if any assistance can be given from my department, we'd be happy to give it, and indeed we'd be very happy to talk to the member if he thinks there's some way that we could usefully help.
Question number 4 has been withdrawn. Sammy Douglas. Mr. Douglas.
Question number 5, Mr. Speaker, please.
That's you, isn't it? Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I'll ask Junior Minister Jonathan Bell to answer this question.
Following our request for an independent assessment of the Victims and Survivors Service, the Commissioner for Victims and Survivors appointed a multidisciplinary team of independent experts to progress that work. The independent assessment focused on the individual needs review process, along with the policy framework and any wider issues around service delivery, such as communication, including interactions with both clients and groups. On the 14th of February, Commissioner Stone presented us with the full assessment reports, along with her advice on the 4 main areas of work of the Victims and Survivors Service. We have welcomed this advice and the 55 recommendations contained within the reports, which will now help shape what we do and how we do it, and we remain committed to progressing work on implementing the recommendations over the coming months. And the reports have been published on the OFM-DFM website.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and could I thank the Junior Minister for his response so far. I'm sure the Junior Minister will agree with me that last week was a particularly traumatic time for victims and survivors, and could he inform us what the timescale is for the implementation of these 55 recommendations?
I certainly do, and our thoughts and our prayers are with the victims and survivors, particularly in the light that many were re-traumatised with the information that we received last week. We moved very swiftly in terms of the recommendations to put in place this review, and we asked for a short turnaround time for the report. In other words, we got the report in a couple of months, and we intend to turn it around in a couple of months. It's because we wanted action to be taken swiftly, and we wanted action to be taken urgently to address the concerns of victims and survivors. The 55+ recommendations are very welcome. I believe they will significantly improve the service that we give to victims and to survivors. Some of the issues had already been identified to us, and these have been addressed through the programme board that we set up. And we set up that programme board immediately on hearing the concerns that had been raised. We obtained the report in a matter of months, and working closely with the Victims Service Board and with our own team in OFM-DFM, want to see implementation as quickly as possible over the next couple of months.
Alec Maskey. Mr. Maskey.
Question number 6, Controller.
Mr. Speaker, in light of the McAleese report into Magdalene Laundries and representations made to us, we appointed a senior civil servant to research and draft a scoping paper on Magdalene Laundry-type institutions that operated in Northern Ireland to inform us of the potential actions we might be able to take. We continue to consider the options that this paper set out. Presently, under the terms of reference for the inquiry into historical institutional abuse, any woman who entered a laundry before she was 18 may contribute to the inquiry, including recounting their childhood experiences to the inquiry's acknowledgement forum and having those experiences acknowledged. However, we recognise that there are women who were over the age of 18 when they entered the Magdalene Laundry-type institutions, and there is a need to provide them with a forum where these issues can be addressed and their experiences acknowledged.
Mr. Maskey.
Thank the First Minister for his response, and I do want to acknowledge the good work being done already on these matters, and acknowledge that they're very comprehensive, complex and difficult for many of the victims and survivors themselves. Is the First Minister at this time in any position to elaborate further on what the thinking may be around the type of forum which might be envisaged?
Mr. Speaker, I think I have to say, to the best of my knowledge, there have been some young women who were under the age of 18 at the time who have already gone and made contact with the HAI because it is part of institutional abuse, and no doubt they will be able to have some acknowledgement and recognition as part of that process. We have not, as a department, as best I understand it, had anyone over the age of 18 coming to us to give us details that we might pursue, though I think we have been informed that Amnesty International have at least 2 cases that have come before them. So we are trying to make some assessment of the extent to which this is an issue that needs to have an inquiry. But even if there is not to be an inquiry, I think that there is a strong argument that could be made for some kind of acknowledgement so that people can come forward. And maybe that requires us more to be proactive in terms of making a call for people to come forward, because it may not be until that is publicly put out there that we'll have people coming forward to give us the details, which to this date we have not been given.
Alwyn McGuinness. Mr McGuinness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I note what the First Minister has said and the progress that is being made. But has the First Minister had any discussions with the Southern Government in relation to the Magdalen laundries, just to see if there are any schemes or any issues there which might be helpful for us to manage this process?
Mr. Speaker, when we were dealing with setting up the HAI, we did have contact with other administrations that had gone through this same kind of process. And if we reach the stage where there is a justification to have an inquiry of some kind, obviously, in setting up that inquiry, and of course it fits into matters that we've dealt with over the last number of days, there are many different types of judicial inquiry that one can have, and they take very different forms, depending on what the kind of outcome is that you want, whether you want one quickly, or in the case of the HIA, where it will be several years down the road, or in case of ones that are set up in the Inquiry Act, it could be many years down the road. So while in one case the necessity might be to get a quick result, you might have one type of inquiry. So certainly if we get to the stage of there being justification to have an inquiry, then we could look at the type of inquiry that you would have.
Danny Kinahan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the First Minister for his answer. But will the First Minister clarify the Department's position regarding whether they will support an historical abuse inquiry for all the victims of abuse who do not have access to the current process chaired by Sir Anthony Hart?
Well, I don't believe that there are any cases where there is no access, except the issue that's confined by date, which was agreed, obviously, in the legislation that we put through this Assembly. The big issue in the terms of the Magdalen laundry case is that legally anyone who was over the age of 18 was not forced to be in the Magdalen laundries, and therefore there's a different set of circumstances. If they were under the age of 18, then they can go through the existing HAI procedures. If they are over the age of 18, again I point out, we have had no one approach the Department, to the best of my knowledge, who is in the category of over 18, though Amnesty have indicated that they have 2 cases.
Question number 7 has already been answered. Mickey Brady.
Cast ever had question 8, Cancoli.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I will ask Junior Minister Jonathan Bell to answer this question.
We have regularly stated our commitment to producing a sexual orientation strategy in the Assembly and in the text of the Good Relations Strategy, together building a united community. In order to achieve this commitment, we have asked officials to commence public consultation, and the strategy will be published once the consultation process has been completed. The strategy will aim to promote an environment free from harassment and bullying and to tackle homophobia in all forms, including violence and abuse, and to promote equality of opportunity for LGBT people.
Mr. Brady.
I thank the Junior Minister for his answer. As you are aware, there was a debate in the Assembly, a motion in December which was passed. Can the Minister assure us that the consultation will be a wide-ranging one and will be inclusive of all the relevant stakeholders?
Yes, I can. I can do that on the basis I've had a number of discussions with our own officials in OFM, DFM, who have communicated right across the board with all the groups. I'm very pleased that the information that I have back is that all the groups are responding. I like the fact that our own officials have done this with sensitivity, and they have tailored questions, and they have provided means for which groups can answer over the web in order to get that fullest amount of consultation and the fullest amount of feedback to inform the strategy.
Dolores Kelly. Mrs. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you'll be well aware since you entered office in 2007 that this matter has been on the agenda, and there's been repeated questions with the same answer. That will be shortly, it will be next year, it will be in a few months' time, and yet there's still no sexual orientation strategy. Could the Junior Minister confirm or deny that the hold-up in publishing of this strategy is because of religious belief among some of his own party members?
Well, I think the important thing is that we have a strategy that addresses the needs that I've outlined, that addresses that people, whatever their background, whatever their sexual orientation, whatever their ethnic minority, whatever their political belief, whatever their religious belief, all have equality of opportunity. I've spoken out a number of times against anybody being subjected to violence, being subjected to intimidation, being subjected to bullying, not only in this job but also in previous jobs that I held within the policing board. And I think the important thing is that I'm getting a lot of very positive feedback from the groups responsible. OFM, DFM have responded to those groups and tailored the consultation, as I said in my earlier answer, to get the maximum input back through from them. And when we have that, we will publish. And it's important, as I say, that for everyone, regardless of what their status on religious belief, on sexual orientation or on the colour of their skin, have equality of opportunity and are not subjected in any way to abuse, to violence or to bullying.
Mike Nesbitt. Mr. Nesbitt.
Question 9, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, as Chair of the OFM-DFM Committee, I'm a little surprised that it was either necessary or appropriate to use an oral question to ask us about liaison arrangements between his committee and our department. Liaison takes place on an almost daily basis between the clerk to the committee and our Assembly liaison officer to schedule business in a way which reflects both the committee's requirements and our need to ensure that the information we provide is accurate, relevant and reflects a shared view on the subject. We are aware, through publicity given by the committee to the matter, that the member in his role as chairperson has concerns about the effectiveness of these arrangements. He will also be aware that the head of the Northern Ireland Civil Service, in his position as Permanent Secretary of DFM, will be meeting him and his committee colleagues on Wednesday of this week to discuss these matters further.
Mr. Nesbitt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the First Minister. He will be aware I am trying every avenue to try and resolve issues, which I think are highlighted by the fact that since summer recess there have been 38 occasions and across 20 minutes of either cancelled briefings or late papers, that over a longer period the average response rate for queries from the Department is 58.8 days.
Encourage the member to come to his question.
And the record is 299 working days. Is the Minister satisfied, and if not, what actions is he taking?
Well, first of all, I think the committee is doing the right thing in terms of meeting with the head of the Civil Service, who is the Permanent Secretary of OFM-DFM, to look at these issues and how they might be resolved more efficiently and effectively. I think there needs to be some understanding that there is a requirement on the departmental officials to ensure that when they give answers, that those answers are full and that they are accurate. On many occasions, that does take them time in order to establish that. But we have the further difficulty, and let's be absolutely honest about it. There is a further difficulty always in a department that has two ministers who are required to give approval, and therefore any request that comes in for information goes through two sieves as opposed to one. So clearly, if it was a one-minister department, there can be quicker answers, and we do need to look at those issues to see if that can be resolved more speedily. Again, I'll say to the member who is the chairman of the committee, I'm happy to meet him about those issues. I'm pretty sure that the Deputy First Minister would also be happy to meet him on those issues to see if, in particular cases, we can resolve them more expeditiously.
Stephen Mutry. Mr. Mutry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the fact that ministers attend the committee on a regular basis, with junior ministers having attended on a number of occasions recently. Can the First Minister confirm that he and the junior ministers will continue to make themselves available to the committee?
Mr. Speaker, of course we will. And while there are formal processes, and in many cases that would be the most satisfactory way of dealing with them, I'm sure informally we can also talk about the issues which may be concerned. Though I think that the thrust of the Chairman's question was about information being supplied to the committee, and I think it's the flow of that information that is the concern of the chairperson of the committee, and I think we do want to look at ways to see how that can be dealt with more expeditiously.
Ian Millen. Mr. Millen.
Question 10.
I think this, Mr. Speaker, is something of a record to get this far down the list. As the Deputy First Minister informed the Assembly on the 27th of January, I can confirm that consideration of the options for filling the position of Attorney-General after the current term ends in May 2014 is underway.
Ian Millen.
Ken Collier, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the First Minister has already answered my question, supplementary, so
Alec Godwin.
Well, yes, thank you. Apologies that I didn't get on my feet earlier as quickly as I should. But could the First Minister explain that the answer he has given today is essentially the answer that the Deputy First Minister gave in January, which is essentially the same answer that the First Minister, I think, gave in October. Now, this is the Chief Legal Advisor to the Executive, and we were told in October that a decision would be taken in, quote, a few weeks. Can you reconcile all of that?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'll take that as a compliment that the member is indicating the consistency of the department and the answers that he's getting from the Deputy First Minister and myself. Of course, there does come a time when the issue has to be resolved, but it has to be resolved, obviously, on the foot of our consideration of a report about the role of the Attorney-General in Northern Ireland, not the person but the role of the office, and what changes we are going to make, if any, to the role of the office. We've had discussions in the Executive as to what changes there should be in the role of the office, and I think it is only fair that anyone who is going to hold the role of Attorney-General needs to know the conditions that might apply to the post that would at that stage be filled.
Gregory Campbell. Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the First Minister confirm that in establishing who the next Attorney-General will be, the consideration will be given to ensuring that that person and their office will examine the legality of any administration scheme, such as the one we have discussed last Friday, and whether or not it should be established and run through the NIO or, in fact, the Justice Department here of this Assembly?
Mr. Speaker, of course, the Office of Attorney-General is an independent office, and it would not be for us to determine how the Attorney-General might approach those issues. However, the Executive does have the role of drawing to the attention of the Attorney-General issues which they may need his advice upon. Indeed, I assume that any Minister of the Executive can do that, and may already have been asking those questions.
Order, members. That concludes all questions to the First Minister. We now move on to topical questions to the First Minister, and I call Tom Buchanan. Mr. Buchanan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minister, over the last few days there have been allegations that the Policing Board was made aware of the administration scheme in relation to on-the-runs. Does the First Minister accept that at no point the Policing Board was ever made aware that letters were being issued to those who were on the run, or that subsequent use could be made of them?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as a member of the Policing Board, I think the member is probably in the best position, and I assume by his question he is making it very clear that the Policing Board was not made aware of the details of the administrative scheme. Indeed, in terms of the accusation, which essentially came from Mr. Dennis Bradley, it soon became known that, in fact, Mr. Bradley himself had not been made aware of the exercise of the royal prerogative of mercy in some of those cases, and therefore publicly had to acknowledge that he himself had been kept in the dark about some aspects of on the runs and how they were being dealt with. I think the bottom line in this matter is that everybody in the community was aware that they were on the runs. Everybody was aware of the fact that Sinn Féin was pushing for something to be done on this issue. Everyone was aware of the fact that the government had acknowledged that there was an anomaly. But if one then looks at all of the documentation that is available, both in terms of the minutes of the Policing Board and in terms of the comment in the book of Jonathan Powell, where he indicates wrongly, but only technically wrongly, that there were references made in the joint declaration. It was, in fact, there was no reference in the joint declaration, but there was a reference in a separate paper on the runs. But the reference in the separate paper was on to legislative proposals coming forward. And indeed, I have a communications which I am happy to place in the library of the House, of a letter from the Prime Minister to the leader of the party, Dr Paisley, at that time, which makes it very clear that the references in the Jonathan Powell book, which he is right to make and which are accurate, relate to legislation being brought forward, which we indicated we would oppose, where in fact in the House of Commons we brought forward something like 50 amendments, slightly over 50 amendments, and at every stage we opposed that piece of legislation.
Thomas Buchanan. Tom Buchanan.
Thank the First Minister for his response. How does he respond to Peter Hain, who over the weekend suggested that senior politicians in Northern Ireland should have been aware that this scheme existed on the basis that everyone knew that on-the-runs issue needed to be resolved?
Well, he is right, of course. Everyone knew that the government had indicated that the issue had to be resolved. I think of greater concern is that if one looks through Hansard, one will find that on the 11th of October 2006, I asked Mr Hain, and I quote, "Is the Secretary of State aware that although we welcome the earlier answer from the Minister of State that no legislation is to be brought before the House, will the Secretary of State reassure the House that no other procedure will be used to allow on-the-run terrorists to return?" Mr Hain's reply was, "There is no other procedure." That's a clear indicator, and there's a further answer later in March of 2007 from Lady Herman, asking almost precisely the same question, where he has asked if there is any other consideration, and he says none. Those, in my view, are contrary to the facts laid down in the Downey judgment, where it shows that even back in September of 2002, some years earlier, 4 or 5 years earlier than the two questions were asked, that 174 such applications under the scheme have been brought forward, and at least in 2002, 61 people had been told that they could return. The process was clearly underway in 2002, never mind 2006, 2007, and therefore the answers given in the House of Commons are inaccurate.
Ian McRae. Mr McRae.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the First Minister believe that there was any authority for the Northern Ireland Office to continue to operate the administrative scheme for the on-the-runs after the devolution of Policing and Justice in April of 2010?
Well, I think this touches on the issue raised by my friend, the member for East Londonderry, earlier on. I don't claim to be a lawyer, but I have to say, even with the fact that I have been a lawmaker for probably the best of 35 years, looking at the negotiations that were held on policing and justice, it seems very clear to me that matters relating to the PSNI, to prosecutions and other matters would suggest that the responsibility for this issue should have been transferred in 2010. If that is the case, then there is no legal authority for either the PSNI to be responding in the way that it did, and certainly no authority for the NIO to be issuing letters. I think that's a matter that the inquiry judge will want to look at. It may well be an issue that the Attorney-General may want to look at. It will certainly be a matter that we will take up with the PSNI, and arrangements have been made both to have meetings with the PSNI and with the Secretary of State on these issues. The authority does not lie somewhere out there to float around between the NIO and the devolved administration as to who wants to take an issue out. Authority is laid down in law as to whose responsibility it is.
Ian McRae. Mr McRae.
If in fact the powers were devolved, can the First Minister detail what he believes the implications could be for any letters that were issued by the Northern Ireland Office at that time?
Well, I very much understand the view expressed by the Justice Minister, which I think is a healthy position for him to take, that he certainly wouldn't want to be dealing with these matters and wouldn't give any approval. But of course it wouldn't be up to the Justice Minister as to whether his department has a responsibility for those matters. And if they have the responsibility for those matters, the Justice Minister would certainly find my support and those of my colleagues, and I believe the Ulster Unions and the SDLP, in that he would not continue with such a scheme. That would call into question certainly the immediate invalidating the letters, the 38 letters that were dealt with in terms of the post-devolution issues, though they may well be dealt with anyway, but under the new arrangements as set out in the statement of the Secretary of State. However, one way or the other, it is the purpose of the inquiry, it is the purpose of the undertaking given by the Secretary of State to ensure three things in relation to the on-the-runs letters. Number one, that they do not stop anyone from being prosecuted, that they cannot be regarded as a means to avoid questioning. And there hasn't been a lot of attention given to this issue, but it is of massive importance to victims that the letters don't constitute to the PSNI any reason why the people who have received them should not be pursued, that there should not be active consideration of their cases, that those cases aren't in terms of the future cases that can be examined, where they can push for new information, where if they have any further facts that they can question people, and where they have evidence that they can prosecute.
Joanne Dobson. Mrs Dobson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Support for a soft opt-out organ donation system is one issue which unites both the First and Deputy First Ministers and commands overwhelming public support. Can the First Minister inform the House if the Health Minister's recent one-year delay has made it impossible for the Executive to bring in a soft opt-out system before the end of this Assembly mandate?
Well, can I say to the member, because as someone who carries a donor's card and recognises, having spoken to the professionals, that it is enormously valuable for them to have the maximum number of organs available, and that does in fact save lives. I'm certainly in the position that I will support any effort that is out there to increase the number of people who might come forward and volunteer to make organs available under the scheme. So I have enormous sympathy for her proposal, though I don't recognise it to be the only way where we can increase the number of organ donations. The Minister has a responsibility on the basis of medical advice to inform himself and have available to him the most up-to-date and best information as to the impact of any particular set of proposals. But of course, she has a bill coming before this House which can circumvent any other proposal, either by the Minister or by any other bill, to get the view of the Assembly. I think that there is wide support for her bill. I don't know when it will come to the House, whether she has ironed out all of the issues relating to it. But if it comes to the House, I and certainly some of my colleagues will support it. Others have a view that there is a different and better way of doing it. I, for my part, will support either the alternative bill or her bill. I'll do anything that I can to increase the numbers.
Mrs. Dobson.
Can I thank the First Minister for his answer and again welcome his support for soft opt-out. I wrote to both the First and Deputy First Ministers on the 20th of November last year asking for a meeting with them, given their personal support. I haven't received a response yet. Will the Minister prioritise a meeting with me on an issue that has so much potential to save lives, and for once deliver a good news story from this Assembly to the transplant charities and all those members of the public out there who back it?
Well, I see no reason why such a meeting shouldn't be set up and set up quickly. And if the member wants to walk round to my office, I'll join with her in getting a date set in the diary for such a meeting.
David Hillage. Mr. Hillage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First Minister, the member of Lagan Valley, Mr. Basil McRae, has indicated that he believes that the line should be drawn under the past, and effectively there should be an amnesty for offences committed before 1998. How do you, First Minister, view this position?
Well, I've already made my views known on this issue, and I think that anyone who is a victim of terrorist-related criminality would feel outraged that somehow there should be a line drawn under the execution and hope of justice in their case. It is all right for those of us who have not been faced by losing a member of our families, though in Northern Ireland there are few that have not been touched in some way by terrorist activity. And to suggest that people should have closed off the option of justice is abhorrent to me. The member argues it on the basis of what is in the public interest. I agree with one of the Attorneys General who, in the course of the judgment on the Downey case, indicated that, in his view, it would always be in the public interest that those who are believed who have been responsible for terrorist crimes should be prosecuted.
David Hillage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank the First Minister for his answer. Further to that, the member for Lagan Valley has also argued that victims will not be able to get justice in the future, and essentially it would be better if they realised that. How does the First Minister regard that argument?
Well, I have never regarded the member for Lagan Valley as being a seer or someone who had some ability to look into the future with any degree of accuracy. The fact is that some people have been brought to the courts on information that has been gathered subsequently. And the issue here is whether there always remains the hope for justice on the part of the victims and the fear of justice on the part of the perpetrators.
Mr. Wilson.
The First Minister will be aware of the anger from the general public and the victims of terrorism in particular at the dirty deal which was struck between Sinn Féin and successive UK governments on runaway terrorists. Given the smug and insensitive response that there has been from Sinn Féin on this issue, what implications does he believe this has for the leaders' talks on flags, the past and parades?
Well, first of all, can I say to my friend that I think anybody who suggests that the reaction from Unionist political leaders was in some way manufactured or synthetic does not understand the feelings in the Unionist community. I have to say I have not had more letters on any other subject over the last number of years than on this issue. People are outraged. And they are outraged on a number of different levels. They are outraged at the implications of one-sided justice, and that damages the whole of the justice system, that particular circumstances are available for one set of those who have been responsible for crimes and not for another. And I think that was drawn into the most bold relief by the fact that the removal by the then government of the legislation dealing with on the runs was on the basis that Sinn Féin withdrew their support because they didn't want soldiers to enjoy the same kind of privileges that terrorists would have. Now, that's an outrage, I think, in any society. In terms of the second part of his question, in relation to the Haas talks, I have indicated that I believe that the issues that are ranged by the Haas talks are issues that have to be dealt with. I do not believe that it is possible to reach any conclusions on those issues relating to the past until we have the inquiry outcome, though that does nothing to stop us looking at the issues relating to parades or the Commission to deal with flags and identity. But the whole purpose for us of the matters relating to the past was to ensure that there was access to justice to those who had not received justice for the loss of their victim, for their family members. That indicates that we need to be sure that everyone is susceptible to investigation, inquiry and prosecution.
That concludes questions to the First Minister.